Isso. Minha, ei, tomaram um bagulho. Tô olhando só até já passava o sol, já passava o sol. Então, vou pegar uma pequena pausa. Isso que eu tava aqui para trabalhar. Sol. Tem sol,
Somewhere, anywhere.
No more. We have enough.
Just a remark for hotel guests, the checkouts in is by 12 o'clock. Sorry, the checkout is by 12:30. However, we will finish by 11, so you can get out. Mirminjesi, dobro jutro, good morning. Welcome to the second day of the Kosovo, first edition of the Kosovo Peace and Democracy Summit. We will kick this off with a very important topic, the topic of the role of the civil society in disruptive societies. But before that, we will have our dear Ramadan Ilazi present the paper that he wrote with Teuta Avdimetaj, and following his presentation, we will start a panel discussion. So, Dani, please.
Thank you, Milica, so much also for all the hard work you put in organizing this event. And we concluded yesterday with me, and as promised, we are starting with me today as well. What I will do is just sum up the paper that me and my colleague Teuta Avdimetaj wrote on mapping institutional mechanisms and civil society practices that help diffuse or disrupt conflict, diffuse tension and disrupt conflict. This paper was commissioned by Sbunker, and I also want to extend my appreciation to Agon for his support and guidance in the process. So basically, the key aspect of our paper is linking some of the work that civil society does and some of the institutional mechanisms with a larger, I guess, goal or objective of disrupting conflict, or how they help at disrupting conflict. In a sense, we often tend to ignore this aspect of the work that civil society does in the region. And we focused on on 3 countries. So in Serbia, North Macedonia, and Kosovo. So what I will do is just share some of those findings. First, our paper understands disruption of conflict as approaches that aim to foster community resilience against efforts by internal or external actors to, in a way, utilize community vulnerabilities for triggering conflict. So in a sense, we are looking at how different activities that civil society does helps build this community resilience against efforts to exploit the vulnerabilities in the community so that there can be tension or conflict. And these efforts or practices are not as, we are not implying that they are meant at this goal, but they help towards this goal. The paper is grounded in peace building research, which is my background and Teuta's background, but more on security. And we also develop on the concept of everyday by a concept that was put forward or elaborated largely also by McGinty and Richmond. And basically how we see everyday in our paper is as an important tool in exploring the interactions between power sharing arrangements and ordinary citizens, especially in looking at local relations to the norms of multi-ethnicity. So in a sense, every day in our paper is important because we look at the unsuspected aspect of the mechanisms and how that mechanism approaches the citizens in the community. Also, the concept of everyday in peace is important to guide exploring the impact of formal legal provisions in identity building process, which is a key aspect. Yesterday, we also saw this come up as an issue in our region. So, in general, for Kosovo, ethnic tensions persist, obviously, but major incidents have been often averted by civil society initiatives operating in divided communities, even though these initiatives were not aimed at disrupting conflict, but by engagement, by mere engagement and bringing together different voices and different opinions and people who share different understanding of the situation together to discuss. These have helped diffuse tensions. We can call them like the small valves that you release when the tension is brewing in a pipe. They're small valves you release and then they let some pressure out. So we think this is how these kind of practices help diffuse that tension and disrupt conflict. And Jovana yesterday mentioned how they started doing this, for example, after the famous game between Switzerland and Serbia, and how Agon and her were talking about the need to kind of start to have this open and frank conversation. Although neither Agon or Jovana perhaps have that kind of mobilization influence, I'm assuming, sorry to undermine, but the fact that they are bringing together different people to talk, and I've been part of the meetings, we've been doing this together then in later period, the fact that we are bringing different opinions, different people with different backgrounds and opinions together to have a frank discussion. And these meetings are done by not the presence of international community there or a representative of an embassy. So they are unscripted, raw, proper discussions on key issues. And really they are a treasure trove for scholars, but it's good that they're also not there, I think. So just 5 findings to help facilitate the discussion for the panel. Finding 1, we have seen that there are many institutional power sharing formulas or mechanisms that have been established in these 3 countries, and they are very important for improving inter-ethnic relations and integration, but have not resulted in improving or increasing quality of the relations. So these mechanisms that were created in Serbia, in North Macedonia, in Kosovo, they have been good for integration, for improving the idea that the country is moving in the right direction, but the quality of relations have been less successful in improving the quality of the relations. Second, these institutional power sharing formulas at the local level are important to give confidence to the citizens that they have a mechanism through which they can exercise their rights. For instance, in Kosovo, we have these municipal offices for communities and returns. Then also the local assembly or municipal assembly has particular committees for communities. But what we have seen from our research is that these mechanisms are often poorly sourced. They have an outdated mandate. For example, in Kosovo, municipal offices for communities and returns are still approaching the situation as it was, let's say, 2005, 6, or earlier period, when the needs of the communities have changed. For example, younger people were telling us, we want this office to help us get higher education, not buy me woods for winter, which is still, a crisis management mode at these institutions. And second very important aspect, perhaps under unwanted consequence of this, is that these mechanisms often undermine political agency of the communities. For instance, if a member of Serbian community in an Albanian majority municipality goes to the mayor to complain about a particular issue, let's say road safety, the mayors tend to tell these people, go to the municipal office for communities and returns. So this office then becomes, in a way, a channel, an office for everything for non-majority communities in that municipality, and it undermines their political agency. They cannot address their mayor as is their mayor. The mayor says to just go to this office, it will solve everything for you. Finding 3, civil society organizations have been pioneers in breaking the social and political barriers to bring divided communities closer together and foster mutual understanding. And we mentioned the case of Youth Initiative for Human Rights and other NGOs, for example, during the time that Azon also was there, and I know Sofija now works there, right? That because of civil society efforts to organize events, this kind of like imposed on institutions to come up with a formula how they can allow people to travel. And later on, these practices helped forge an agreement on freedom of movement. But I remember myself back in 2005 traveling for the first time to go to Novi Sad for an event, and the kind of practices that were developed then, I think, were imposed by civil society. For Kosovo, a key challenge as a young democracy is creating these stronger bonds across different communities in the society in order to foster higher confidence in the public institutions and a sense that we have a common denominator as communities, regardless of our difference of identities. And this is, our finding is that the good work often that it's done, even by institutional mechanisms, sometimes in some cases, and civil society, is undermined by the larger context created by political discourse, by political leaders. Now, our other, the paper is quite long, but I'm just summing up the key points. Again, tensions, finding 5, are constant in our region and in these countries, but and they often, oscillate between escalation, frozen relation, or even rarely a semblance of normalcy. But the idea is that the potential in these countries is there to further utilize both existing civil society practices and institutional mechanisms so that their impact on disrupting conflict can become more effective. And with that, I'll conclude my part. I am very happy that in the panel we have people who are quite competent from each of these countries we studied or researched to give also their impressions of this approach. So thank you for your attention. And with that, I hand over to Milica. Thank you.
all day yesterday. We didn't have technical issues, and it happens today. Anyway, Dani, thank you. This parts of these conclusions were really music to my ears, because I remember how many times when I turned with a problem of the community to someone, they tell me, go to your Serb representatives. And then if you don't have Serb representatives in that ministry, particular ministry that you need, you basically have no one to go to. And even if you have Serb representatives, that doesn't mean that that's the right address. Anyway, I'm really happy to announce our speakers for the closing panel of this conference. The discussion is going to be moderated by journalist Zana Cimili. She's going to talk to Belgzim Kamberi from the Institute for Social Policies, Musine, Kokalari. Our guest from Belgrade, Sofija Todorović from Youth Initiative for Human Rights. And our guest from Skopje, Vlora Reçica from the Institute from the Policy Institute. It is my great pleasure to again welcome you for our last panel of the conference.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining here at our panel. Here with us today are Vlora Reçica from the Institute of Democracy from Skopje, Belgzim Kamberi from the Institute of Social Policy, Musine, Kokalari, and Sofija Todorović from Youth Initiative for Human Rights from Belgrade. Our today's topic is civil society's role in conflict disruption, as Dani just presented us the report. Maybe I would like to start with any comments, if you have comments regarding the report Dani just showed us. Okay, maybe.
Well, okay. First of all, I pretty much agree with everything that Dani and her colleague, as I understood that he did this in collaboration with a colleague, actually mapped through this research. I will just maybe like to add one more point that's very important from the conflict disruption in the region, and particularly between Kosovo and Serbia. And I would say that's the cooperation with Victims Association. That's something that is being let's say harder than it was before, since a lot of victims association that are actually representing the victims from the former war, because and actually just because of that war we are talking about all these topics, are under the huge political pressure and huge political influence. So that is something that where civil society is still active, where we are trying actually to talk to these people, to connect them to each other, to enable them platforms, to create together some actually a new inclusive culture of remembrance. That's something that is very important for the peace building process. But due to this high political interference also in this let's say in this field, sometimes it can became more harder. But I think that this type of cooperation have, let's say, a large potential to make this the conflict disruption let's say more effective.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you. Belgzim, anything to add maybe concerning Kosovo and Serbia, since you are in the middle somehow?
Thank you. Excuse me, I will speak in Albanian. It's so more easy for me, but sorry with translate. Jo, unë vetëm desha të prezantimi i Ramadanit që lexova edhe mbrëm, më dok një çështje mjaft e rëndësishme është që krejt këto mekanizmat që i kanë ndërtu institucionalisht në rajon, do thot, edhe pse shihet që ka një farë lloj asimetrie, do thot, edhe në çështjet e mekanizmave që janë ndërtu për mbrojtjen e minoriteteve. Megjithatë, kjo tregon që në njërin anë këto mekanizma nuk kanë mjaftuar për me përmirësu, domethënë, cilësinë që quajtë edhe Ramadanit të marrëdhënieve ndër etnike, Edhe në anën tjetër, ajo që dëshmon që megjithatë me krejt këto mekanizmat që janë ndërtu, qoftë në Serbi, qoftë në Kosovë, po madje edhe në Maqedoni, ajo që sot shihet është gjendja e minoriteteve në kuptimin praktik. Po sot ka shku u përkeqësu, po sot.
So, yeah, he said that he read the report and thanks Zana also for the presentation of the findings. And but the thing that although there's been mechanisms created to address the rights of the minorities, they are quite asymmetric. And we see that these mechanisms are not actually enough. Even these mechanisms that are created in Kosovo, Serbia, or Macedonia, we see that like the ethnic cooperation, it's not improving, and actually the situation has become a bit worse than previously.
Ndoshta kisha mbyll me këtë pjesë të thonë që ndoshta mendoj që diskutimi I cili I mungon rajonit në përgjithësi është çështja e minoriteteve në përgjithësi, nuk është duke u biseduar në kuptimin e bashkëpunimit rajonal. Edhe nëse e shohim në çdo dimension që diskutohet faktikisht në dimensionin e bashkëpunimit rajonal, mungon ky diskutim mbi minoritetet. Edhe kjo ka mbetur faktikisht vetëm që diskutohet brenda shteteve sovrane, brenda republikave.
I would want to address the fact that in regional level, the case of minorities is not really discussed, and like issues of minorities or everything related to minorities is only discussed within the states, like in sovereign states, and not in the regional level, and is something that needs to be addressed.
Pra nëse marrim si shembull Serbinë, Serbia ka ndërtu një farë kornizë ligjore të përmes këshillave kombëtare, që quhet, që është një lloj autonomie kulturore për minoritetet. E para. Kosova do thotë bie që ka një lloj kushtetute më shumë të një shtetit pak nga multikulturore dhe me mekanizma të diskriminimit pozitiv. Po nëse e shohim në jetën praktike, e shohim që faktikisht ka një farë lloj segregacioni, një farë lloj mbyllje të bukerizimit, edhe e ka përforcuar. Domethënë shoqënitë e ndara. Pra megjithatë mbetemi në shoqëni të cilët janë të segreguara në kuptimin etnik. Edhe këto mekanizma nuk po mjaftojnë për me ndërtu një kohezion social më të fortë shoqëror. Prandaj do të them dashur diskutojmë tutje që një çështje është faktikisht çështja e kornizës normative, kushtetuese dhe ligjore, por një çështje tjetër që më më rëndësi është çështja praktike në terren.
I'll wrap this shortly up. So Mr. Kamberi just mentioned that there's a legal framework created in Serbia based on international law to actually address the cases of minorities in Serbia, while in Kosovo it's also included in the constitution. And at the end, he says that we have to see this issue in a more practical way and rather than in the legal framework.
I would like to continue with Vlora and ask her because the minority actually are very actual at this moment in North Macedonia. Do you have any comments about the part of North Macedonia in this report?
First of all, good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. What really caught my attention in Dani's and Teuta's paper was actually the power sharing mechanism at local level. Because if we talk about North Macedonia, the thing is that our whole country is based on power sharing mechanisms. We have the Ohrid Framework Agreement. Our constitution is built in a way that is also very multi-ethnic based. However, at the local level, this is one of the things that we are missing. We are missing power sharing mechanisms and actually spaces where communities can meet. For example, I was thinking about the 2004 law on the borders of the municipalities. This is when it happened that our municipalities, in a way, now in 2022, became more or less monoethnic. So because of this divide, people have stopped contacting more. The mechanism in 2004 was meant to create peace and stability. However, it in a way has created more of a parallel societies rather than more stability. For example, we have people from municipalities in the west that have never traveled in the east of the country, or people from the east of the country that have never traveled to the west of the country, and they do not have context, but more importantly, they do not learn from each other. And this is where the role of civil societies actually comes in North Macedonia. This is it's the civil societies that bring together people from different communities through youth programs, through cultural programs, through well, also political programs, the initiatives, and such. It is here where civil society's role comes in North Macedonia. And another really important point, if we want to understand how divided and parallel society in North Macedonia is, we had in 2021 local elections, and we had a few civic initiatives that were running for office in the councils of the local municipalities. And we had two important ones, one in Tetovo and one, well, two in Skopje. It was really interesting for me to see that the civic initiative in Tetovo was fully an Albanian list, while the civic initiative in Skopje, both of them were fully Macedonian lists. And both of these cities are actually multi-ethnic. Tetovo less than Skopje, but Skopje is really a multi-ethnic city, and it was supposed, a civic initiative, it's supposed to reflect the composition of the city. And the two most important civic initiatives were lacking this multi-ethnic element. So it just goes to show that societies are really living in a parallel world. in a way.
Thank you so much for this thorough answer. We are witnessing that the civil society organizations in the Western Balkans are very dynamic and try to influence the various processes, various policies, like to great extent. Nevertheless, changes come only after mostly great pressure from international community comes. For example, the previous case we had with the Pride Parade in Belgrade, or the shuttle diplomacy to calm down the tensions between Kosovo and Serbia in North Kosovo. Do you, to what extent are the civil society organizations successful in the campaign of public representation or effective advocacy? I would like to, start.
I really have this need to mention something when it comes to international pressure. It's not because of international pressure. International pressure comes after the initiatives that are coming from the local level. I know that usually people, particularly in Serbia, have this urge to look at people who are working in civil society like we are some aliens, they're not part of society. That's not true. So I really believe that actually this international pressure comes after lots of work that is done on daily basis by civil society, even though we are a minority. But basically in the circumstances that we are functioning, I strongly believe, and I'm like this huge admirer for all the people who are working particularly on Kosovo, Serbia, and minority issues between Serbs and Albanians. I think that their work is very important, and international society actually is basing this pressure on their work, on their alarms. So I really believe that this is a part of all of our advocacy strategy. I think that it's sad that we need international actors to actually make our governments listen to us, because I strongly believe that we can do that also without them, with a small collaboration and things like that. But I think that that also reflects the state of relations that we actually have among us. But I strongly believe that I know that the climate when it comes to the civil society organizations that are dealing with Serbia and Kosovo in Kosovo, it's different than the climate and the working atmosphere for those dealing with Kosovo in Serbia. So, for example, I can talk from the perspective of Youth Initiative for Human Rights. Youth Initiative for Human Rights was founded in 2003, and it was the first organization that actually started exchanging young people from Kosovo and Serbia, and actually creating links and creating this new space for connections between between them after the conflicts. And it was even before pogrom and the next, let's say, larger scale violence that we all as a region faced on the relations between Kosovo and Serbia. But the NGOs in Serbia that are dealing with Kosovo, particularly those who are respecting the reality and who are not keen to continue discussion or to have discussion on Kosovo without actually starting with the truth about what happened in Kosovo, we are actually facing a lot of problems and troubles because the let's say support of the government and of the political leaders, both the opposition, if they agree, then they remain silent. Because currently, for example, in Serbian parliament, correct me if I'm wrong, if somebody knows something that I don't, when it comes to the status of Kosovo, all parties are thinking the same about Kosovo. We, in 2007, we had at least 3 parties political in the parliament that thought something different. Now they're all thinking the same, which means that basically the climate and the atmosphere in which Youth Initiative for Human Rights in Serbia is organizing, for example, Mirdita Dobar Dan Festival, will actually then be structured around can we recognize Kosovo with a cultural festival, and that is not something that is being imposed by NGO, but I think that it actually reflects the problems that we have, and it actually reflects the climate that we have. What I can say is that I believe that the task of civil society is to stay to boost its resilience towards this kind of pressures, because somebody is constantly pushing you to talk about the things that, for example, in that moment are not, let's say, in the focus of your initiative. So during Mirdita, we're usually forced to talk about the status of Kosovo, like, okay, we can contribute to the discussion, but Tiher cannot recognize or de-recognize Kosovo, of course. But then you're spending a lot of time to talk about that instead to talk about the program of the festival. How many young people is there? Why is this important? Who is there? Is it like the mixed festival where we have people from Preševo Valley, people from Serbs from north and south of Kosovo, Albanians from Pristina? Like, it's really a mixed and very, I think, environment that we all need, and we should nurture these kind of initiatives. But in Serbia, due to, let's say, this hostile attitude to the government that is constantly, shifting the discussion, it actually shrinks the space for our work. So I think that the effects and the impact of our work would be bigger, at least if we have, some sort of a dialogue with the government. But basically, when you have relations with the government in terms that they're basically stigmatizing all NGOs who are starting the discussion about Kosovo with the truth about Kosovo, then it's hard. But still, I think that it's basically a pioneering work, and it's the work that will be the key player in any kind of change process. And I strongly believe that I'm just now explaining the situation. I'm not being pessimist, but basically these are just the facts that are very related to all civil society efforts that are being invested into this cooperation.
When you mentioned now the cooperation between the government and the civil society, I wanted to ask you, was there any coordination or anything when it comes to the last report, which was voted actually and published by the Serbian government on the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue in the parliament? Did you have any cooperation or any influence there?
Well, basically, the only body that we have in Serbia that is somehow cooperating with the government is National Convent, or Working Group for the Chapter 35. And this is like a group of 19 organizations and 5 individuals, where we are actually discussing all Kosovo-Serbia related issues from different aspects and angles, depending on the situation, and where we actually sometimes have the opportunity to talk with the government representatives, with the Prime Minister, with the President, and this was before usually organized in the forms of hearings. So they come, we prepare, let's say, something that is related to our work to express the results, but there is no dialogue there, but at least it's some sort of a contact. They are obliged to hear you. But when it comes to this concrete action regarding the plan that was voted in the National Assembly of Serbia, there were no basically consultations about it. It was a plan prepared by the president, and basically it was presented to the National Assembly, where we had a chance that for 2 days or more, we listened to the MPs actually sharing comments, opinions, questions about this plan. But for me, what was the saddest thing that we could see is a huge lack of knowledge, except of, let's say, some overall phrases regarding Kosovo and Serbia, how that we should think about the people who are living there, that we should do this, we should do that. We saw very little concrete, recommendations that will somehow resemble that we know that these people have read any of the documents that we're talking for years, that they understand the situation, that they understand the challenges, that they know what kind of rules are applied to this situation. So there is a huge lack of knowledge that we are witnessing. Youth Initiative will now, since we now at least have parties in the parliament that are ready to actually talk to the civil society organizations, we actually plan to focus more on this dialogue, at least with the parties who are willing to talk and actually to share our expertise and knowledge and context with them, and to actually, somehow support this debate in the parliament so it can be, let's say, more concrete, that it can actually have an opportunity to take to some concrete results, because like this, very few concrete results can be foreseen in the future.
Thank you. In my previous question, I asked about the international community pressure when it comes, for example, is the international community an indispensable factor today when it comes to, because civil society organization often uses their influence to address certain topics, like topics that are clearly priorities for the citizens, but not for the political elites. And why is this so? Can we even get to the level where influencing different social political processes without the mediation of the international community, or is this a scenario for the Western Balkan utopia? Maybe, maybe Vlora can, since we had a big debate in North Macedonia now in the last months, maybe you can explain.
Yeah, I will give just, I think that as long as civil society, think tanks and NGOs in general are dependent on international funds, the international community is indispensable. I think the problem is not just high-level politics. I think it's also everyday work of the NGOs. We're highly dependent on international funds because we do not have, as societies, developed civic society that thinks that it is okay to fund civil society. That doesn't mean corruption, but it means supporting a cause you believe in. So there is maybe a minority of organizations in Macedonia that function with funds, local funds. And in this structural way, we are and we will remain in the near future very dependent on the international community in terms of our everyday work, but also in terms of our politics. If we are talking about high-level politics, I mean, you can see the case of Kosovo and Serbia, you can see the case of North Macedonia with the last dispute, ongoing actually, dispute with Bulgaria and the French proposal, and the way a solution was imposed on the country. And many visits from the international community in the week that the French proposal was supposed to be voted in the parliament. We had von der Leyen, we had Saracen, we had every main politician in Europe you could think about coming to speaking in our parliament to the citizens, like quote unquote, because they were speaking to the politicians in the parliament, trying to convince them to actually accept the proposal that mainly citizens were opposing, but also not just citizens, the civil society was actively warning against. So definitely the international factor remains a much relevant factor in our everyday politics. I also wanted to highlight another point. You were talking about cooperation with Sofia. You were talking with Sofia about the cooperation between the government and civil societies. In Macedonia, we formed this body that is called the Council for Cooperation between the Government and Civil Society. And this council was really important at one point because there was a lack of trust between the government and civil societies because of the previous government and the inspections that happened in 2016, actually the witch hunt of civil society. After the creation of this council, and our hope for better cooperation with the government, which happened, we really did have, and we in a way still have a good cooperation with the government, the civil society. This body has been accused of corruptive actions. It's been accused of misusing of funds. And the most important thing is last year, this body was transferred to the ministry. I have to read it because it has a long name, Ministry for Political System and Relations between the communities. So what they did is transferred this body, which is really important to be a very neutral body, to this Ministry for Political System and Relation between the communities. And it turned out that most of the funds that this ministry will allocate to this body are to their civil society organizations. So again, we have a corruptive action that is already fueling the mistrust of the citizens in the government and in the civil society. Because it's really important to mention that actually the level of trust of the citizens in the civil society in North Macedonia is almost at the same level as the trust in political parties and in politicians. It's actually lower than the trust in the government and lower than the trust in the president, the parliament, and at the same level as the trust in the judiciary. So this kind of actions as this council and transferring it at the ministry that is already highly distrusted because of its contentious character just fuels distrust of citizens that civil society is there working for them. And this conspiracy theory that is actually foreign agents working for the interest of the international community.
Belgzim, if you have anything to add regarding the previous questions.
Unë mendoj që ajo çka ka ndodhur 15 vitet e fundit është një lloj degradimi për të tillë. Edhe për shkak të politikës së bashkisë ndërkombëtare kon fjalën të kryeqendrave perëndimore kur i përket çështjes së demokratizimit të brendshëm.
I think for the international community, for its involvement in what has been happening in the last 15 years, I see this kind of as a degraded situation. So we can.
Dhe nëse e shoh në bashkia ndërkombëtare, një e ka duke qenë që është fokusuar te stabiliteti, edhe në anën tjetër e ka centralizuar ka shumë, do thot, politikën në kryeqendrat, e veçanërisht në qeveri, sa që e ka braktisë demokratizimin, e në këtë drejtim e ka braktisë edhe minoritetet.
The international community, by focusing more in centralizing this topic, it has been forgetting the issues of minorities and.
Edhe një për shembull i kemi edhe të dy raste. I pari është ajo që ka ndodhur me Serbët në Kosovë.
So we have two cases. The first one, what happened with the Serbs in Kosovo.
Duke qenë që atë shumë kanë investuar që me zgjidhë këto çështje me Vučićin si faktor stabiliteti, e kanë pamundsuar domethënë edhe zhvillimin e një lloj elite të serbëve në Kosovë.
By investing so much time in trying to see Vučić as a stabilizing factor for this issue, they have been reducing the opportunities to create some kind of Serb elite in Kosovo.
Ose për shembull në rastin e shqiptarëve në Serbisë, Lugim Preshevës, ku edhe pse dialogu midis qeverisë dhe shqiptarëve Preshevës ka ekzistuar që nga koha e Zoran Xhinxhiçit, ajo është bllokuar me ardhen pushtet të Vučićit dhe kur s'ka pas presion ndaj Vučićit për dialog të brendshëm me shqiptarët në Serbi. Pra as dialog të brendshëm në Kosovë me serbët e Kosovës, as dialog të brendshëm me shqiptarët në Serbi.
Or the second case, of the minority Albanians in Serbia. There used to be a dialogue between the government and the Albanian minorities in Serbia, and with Vučić coming into government, this dialogue is not taking place anymore, but it's the same for the dialogue of the government in Kosovo with the Serbian minorities in Kosovo, and also with the Albanian minorities in Serbia and the government of Serbia.
Tash na kemi ardhur në një situatë që edhe ato pakicet që çdo herë më pak ekzistojnë. Për shembull, si në Parlament të Serbisë, që pakicet pothuajse janë zgjatje e pushtetit.
And now,
Tash e kena po dash me hungarezët në Serbi, e kena po dash me bosnjakët e Sandžakut, që është instrumentalizuar. Pra më shumë ka një përpjekje nga pushtetet qendrore mi kriju pakicet e veta lojale, se sa me hap diskutim dhe dialog me pakicet për ndërtim të një kohezioni.
and as a consequence, we have seen less presence of minorities in the government. We're taking the case of Hungarian minorities in Serbia and also the Bosnian minorities in Sandžak. The government has tried to create more of its
Loyal minority.
loyal minorities. Yeah, sorry, I forgot the last part.
E kështu që për ato për i kthehen atë ky prezantimi që e paraqitit Dani, nuk ka kuptim ti me ndërtu edhe mekanizma institucionale, sado që ne të janë në përputhje me standardet evropiane, nëse në anën tjetër diskursi publik nga pushteti, e kemi rastin më të mirë që në Serbi ministri mbrëmshëm, në mënyrë të hapur do thot vazhdimisht përdor gjuhë urrëqës ndaj minoriteteve, këto mekanizmat e humbin kuptimin pastaj.
That's why I'm going back to what Dani presented before. We can create mechanisms that fulfill the European standards, but in the practical aspect, it's different. For example, the Ministry of Interior Affairs in Serbia always using a hate speech towards minorities.
Për mbyllit që mendoj që edhe shoqëria civile dhe 15 vitet e fundit ka rënë në këtë grad, sipas meje, e cila domethënë më shumë është orientuar te një farlloj çështje të ndjekjes së procedurave administrative dhe burokratike sapo i përmbushin shtetet standardet, edhe ka braktisë që këtë raportin e dialogut dhe diskutimit midis komuniteteve.
I also want to add that the civil society in the last 15 years has also been falling into this trap. Instead of focusing in this issue, it has been kind of doing a follow-up of administrative work in this.
Jap një shembull praktik. Kur e keni parë në mediat mainstream të Serbisë, vetëm një pjesëmarrje të komuniteteve minoritare në debat publik. Apo në mediat mainstream të Prishtinës, në gjuhën shqipe, keni parë ndonjëherë një përfaqësim të komunitetit serb aty?
I'm just taking one example. For example, in the mainstream media in Serbia, but also in Kosovo, have you seen minority communities in debates? Like, for example, in Serbia, have you seen Albanian minorities in public television in debates, or also vice versa, like Serbian minorities in mainstream televisions in Kosovo?
Shumë ma shumë ka pas pranimi të shqiptarëve në strukturat e shoqërisë civile në Beograd, mas rënies Miloševićit në viteve 2000 sa sot.
In Serbia, you have seen representation of Albanian minority in the civil society of Serbia more after Milošević than now.
Dhe për mua shoqëria civile duhet të orientohet në dy dimensione. Një dimension është ky dimensioni i brendshëm, për me shtyket, domethënë diskutimin kohezioni social brenda shteteve, edhe dy dimensioni rajonal. Bashkërisht, në një dimension të bashkëpunimit rajonal, do të shtysh me këto diskutimet jo vetëm të minoriteteve brenda shtetit, por të një farlloj harmonizimit edhe të gjendjes së minoriteteve në rajon.
Therefore, I would suggest that the civil society focuses in two dimensions. So the first one should be this internal dialogue within the state, or addressing the issues of the minorities and their needs. But the second one in the regional level, where the civil society cooperates in a regional level related to the cases of minorities and addressing their needs and issues.
Do që shoqëria civile është të prishur që këto çështje të zgjidhen nga lart. Dhe duke qenë që lart nuk po ka vullnet për këtë çështje, mendoj që shoqëria civile duhet të bëhet një farë lloj kundërpushteti në këtë drejtim që nga poshtë të shtyjë, sepse edhe ata ashtu lart e kanë homogenizuar mjaftueshëm.
I think also the civil society is expecting for these issues to be addressed and resolved from the bottom, meaning from the central level. While in the contrary, civil society should be pushing from down to actually address also these issues.
Thank you. Sofia, want to add something?
No, I just wanted to add regarding, regarding the last thing that the Belgzim said about the media, because that's also one very important aspect. Yes, you could see a minority Albanian in Serbia media, but either as the baker, whose bakery is being destroyed, or either in the case of the Albanian baker from the suburbs of Belgrade, when he was actually literally satanized by the hooligans and far-right groups because of the picture of his brother that was posted on Instagram at that moment 3 years ago. So, but that's important because these are the only cases where we can see these people in the news, in the main newspaper. So imagine how that further contributes to the stereotypes and prejudice against Albanians. And what is the picture of a random citizen of Serbia about the Albanians who are living in Serbia? So I think that that's really important, but it's also part of a larger problem. And I think that, let's say, a takeaway note for civil society and something that Youth Initiative usually does to somehow counter this, enhance the collaboration with independent media. Bomb them with everything that you have all the time, because I know that at some point, because no one will do anything to change this, we should work on this institutional level and, let's say, support this creation of this new mechanism and enhance our own collaboration. But when it comes to media, you just literally need to be like there all the time.
Është një paradoks, për shembull, nëse e shohim në Serbi, edhe gjitha anketet tregojnë që shqiptarofobi apo romofobi ndaj romëve ka sot më shumë se sa në kohën pas Miloševićit.
It's a paradox in Serbia. If you see all of the latest surveys in Serbia, you see that there's an increased phobia towards Albanians and towards Roma minorities in Serbia.
Pra, kemi një situatë ku një shtet është më afër integrimit evropian se para 10 viteve.
We're in a situation where a country is way more closer to integration in the European Union than 10 years before.
Ndërkaq do thotë klima ndaj minoriteteve shoqërore është domethënë më ksenofobe.
While the climate towards the minorities is more xenophobic.
E kjo nuk më duket që është vetëm në Serbi. Edhe kjo është interesant.
And I think that this is not only happening in Serbia.
E keni përshtypje që shtetet e rajonit, sa do që spaku zyrtarisht po hecin drejt integrimit evropiane, se ksenofobia ndaj minoriteteve më shumë po zhvillohet se sa po zbehet.
It's a trend happening in all of the regional countries here in the Western Balkans, where we see that all of the countries are closer to EU accession, but the xenophobia is actually increasing.
Pra për mua këtë dëshmon e shohim edhe faktikisht edhe raport me LGBT, me komunitetet tjera, kjo për mua dëshmon spaku është një valloj treguesi që duket që ky far procesi integrimit evropian e asaj që quhet evropianizim nuk po shoqërohet me demokratizim.
For me, taking also into consideration of the rights of other communities, LGBTQI plus and other communities, we see that this process of EU integration isn't really also like coherent with the democracy promises.
Mendoj që këtu do të duhet shoqëria civile ta rimendojë vetëm.
I think that the civil society should rethink what it's doing in its work, like it should rethink itself.
Sepse përderisa viteve 90 shoqëria civile ka qenë më shumë e angazhuar në një lloj, që kanë thonë serbisht anti-rat, në një lloj çasti anti-luftë.
Because in the 90s, the civil society had more of a anti-war approach and thinking.
Mendoj që sot lufta do duhet jetë, në që fatmirësisht jemi të luftës, po s'po duket. Lufta duhet jetë në këtë zhvillimin e një valloj shoqëri që po ndërtohen çdo herë më shumë më homogjene. ma xenophobe.
But nowadays, I think that the war, fortunately, it's not happening, but the war should be also in the process of talking about related to the xenophobic issues.
Edhe pe kry me këtë në të kuptimin e asaj që ne edhe mbas e mundit bëhemi pjesë e BE-s. Pa a do të bëhet Ballkani pjesë e BE-s sipas modelit të Orbanit?
And
A ky është modeli që e synojmë si shtete, domethënë mu bë Hungaria të nesërme brenda BE-s, a duajmë edhe të transformojmë shoqërinë tona përmbrenda, edhe të demokratizojmë për të bërë pjesë e BE-s për të varë vlera evropiane më shumë.
so are we approaching the EU integration or getting integrated into the EU according to the views of Orban? Or do we want to actually be part of a European Union embracing European standards and values?
Sepse krejt paradoksi është që sot është që vendet, domethënë njerëz që janë zgjança, si Orbani, janë ata të cilët më shumë të janë për spaku deklarativisht paraqiten për integrimin e Ballkanit në BE. Dhe kjo është paradoksi.
Because today the paradox is that the people that kind of embrace the views of Orban are the ones that are talking mostly about the European integration
Kështu
and
që
aiming for it.
kështu
Yeah, in the Western Balkans, yeah.
që pak këtë
Sorry.
transformimin e brendshëm që cilët duhet ta bëjnë, për mua natyrisht mos do si euroskepticizëm, po nëse nuk ndërtojnë këtë transformojnë këto shoqërinë, veçanërisht raport me minoritetet, qofshin ato etnike, seksuale e tjera, atëherë nuk po ndoket që jemi tu ecë në drejtim të duhur. Nuk jemi të ndërtu paqe të qëndrueshme.
If we're not addressing these issues from internally, speaking about the rights of communities and minorities, then I think that we are not addressing the issue in the proper way.
Well, as opposed to what Belgzim and Sofija were saying, actually in Macedonia, we do have more of a vibrant, let's say, inclusion and in a way representation of minorities in institutions, but in the media as well. Macedonia has a quite diverse media space. However, as I said, our main problem is that while the Ohrid Framework Agreement was intended to integrate Albanians in societies, which it has done in a certain extent, it has also created a lot of parallel communities. There is not a lot of contact between communities in school. There is not a lot of contact with communities afterwards. So actually, if we talk about real and essential contact, it comes after your 20s, after you're 25, when you're joining the workforce. This is where contexts come into be. However, the picture is not as grim, I would say, as in Serbia and in Kosovo. Fortunately, we do have power sharing mechanisms that have been successful at the national level. The Badenter voting in the parliament has been, it has proved at certain points very helpful into the further integration and trust between communities. However, our main problem right now is that our division is not just ethnic. Our division has, our society has become mainly polarized because of two very important disputes for the country. The first one is the dispute with Greece, which has divided the country in the supporters of the name change and the people that were against the name change. This is a division that is persistent still because the name change happened in 2019 officially, so it hasn't really been long. And now with the dispute in Bulgaria, we are talking about a society that hasn't healed, because as a society, you cannot heal for 3 years and say, we are over this issue. Now we have the dispute with Bulgaria, which is it's a much more important dispute in my opinion, because it's actually not just talking about the country as a political entity, but we are talking about the identity of the people. And Bulgaria, and now the French proposal and the friendship agreement with Bulgaria has created much bigger divisions in our society within the communities, not just across communities. We have a Macedonian community that is highly divided and highly polarized between people that are okay, let's say, with French proposal and people that are really against what this proposal represent, and actually what Bulgaria is asking for North Macedonia. I was doing some focus groups recently, and we are trying to see what different citizens think, like Albanian citizens and Macedonian, and we had mixed groups as well. And it was really interesting to see how Albanian citizens, when they are left in their own, not in mixed focus groups, they are very much okay with everything that the countries needed to do to become part of the EU. So they are much free to talk about whatever it takes. We will do whatever it takes. A French proposal, name change, name change. We need to get into the EU. However, when we have mixed groups or when we have only Macedonian groups, these opinions are much more reserved in a way of show of solidarity. So this also shows in a way double standards or a way of cynicism that is prevalent in the society. In terms of EU skepticism, I think it's really important to say that right now support in Macedonia for EU integration is an all-time low in the last 10 years. So at the Institute, we do this survey since 2014, I think. And right now it's an all-time low, but it's really important to stress that actually there is a drop in support within the Albanian community towards EU integration. It's at the same level as the Macedonian community, and this has never been the case. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to investigate why is this so within the Albanian community, and what we are trying to figure it out is the same frustration, I think, as with everyone in the region. It's taking too long. It's a prolonged process. You have promises after the name change. People feel disappointed. And this transferred to the Albanian community as well, because they feel that they are trapped within this issue. And EU, instead of working as a factor that will unite the people, because it's a common goal of everyone in the country, all the citizens, right now is actually working more as a divisive force rather than the unifying force, because you have, as I said, we found out in the focus groups, you have an Albanian community that is really doing whatever it takes. You have a Macedonian community that is reluctant, and of course, because they are being pressured in unfair ways. So this is actually creating a new divide within EU, is creating a new divide between communities and within communities. So it's a pretty negative role that it was not supposed to play.
Oh, that is interesting. Since you mentioned the dispute with Bulgaria, how is the civil society reacting to all these ongoings with the dispute and the amendments which should take place in the upcoming weeks, months?
I think we have to divide it in like two separate fields. So first of all, we learned our lessons with Greece. The thing is that while the dispute with Greece was lasting, there was little to no cooperation between civil societies from Macedonia and Greece. However, right now, after the Prespa agreement, which is actually, it's even part of the Prespa agreement, you have civil societies, especially youth civil societies, working together with civil societies from Greece, and they are building relationships, they are cooperating, they are implementing projects together. There are a few exchanges that are happening. So learning from this experience and knowing that we need to build trust between our societies, between Macedonians and Bulgarians, because there is hate speech in Macedonia and there is huge hate speech in Bulgaria towards both citizens of both countries. We are trying to foster cooperation with civil societies in Bulgaria. The Institute is cooperating in two projects with civil societies in Bulgaria, but it's not just the Institute for Democracy, it's a lot of organizations that are working on building cooperation, especially, of course, again, this is the important role of youth organizations, I think, in the region, because it's the place where young people meet and exchange and talk together. Again, youth organizations are working together with Bulgaria to exchange, to meet young people and coming to Macedonia and going to Bulgaria. So this is a very important lesson we learned with Greece, that we need to start this process of cooperation before, not after an agreement. However, inside the country, I think it's really important to mention that while we had huge issues during the Gruevski government in terms of witch hunt of civil society, our work was really hard in terms of cooperating with the government and being in the public space in general. So our role kind of remained into a watchdog civil society. After the fall of the Gruevski government, civil society became much more vibrant. Cooperation with the government became better. I have to applaud the government for this because we were able to be part of processes where before we did not have really access. However, in the case of Bulgaria, you had leading experts from the civil society sector warning about the issues that will come up if the French proposal is adopted and accepted in North Macedonia. However, those experts and that civil society, I'm talking about leading civil society organizations and which had a reaction together, they were working together and cooperating together. They were labeled hysterical by the prime minister of the country. There are other civil society organizations and leading experts that are demonizing these organizations. There are media connected to Russian and Bulgarian funds that are labeling this organization as a disruptive and unlikely enemy of the progress of the country towards the EU. There is also media that is labeling the civil society as pro-Russian just because they did not support the French proposal. So again, there was in a way an orchestrated attack on civil society that we only saw in the Gruevski government, which means that honestly the government still has this ace up its sleeve that whenever they want, they can make you their friend, they can invite you to the table, they will talk to you, they will consult you, and whenever they want in a switch, you will become the unlikely enemy of the country's democratic progress or the country's EU progress. So the dispute has again fueled quite the hate speech towards civil society.
Is it civil society in North Macedonia involved now in the process of the amendments that should take place very soon? And what about the criminal blockade and the calls for a referendum?
Yeah, so the thing is that when the French proposal came, the government declared that they are conducting this wide consultation process. So everyone was invited in the consultation process. The consultation process lasted 3 days, and the French proposal was sent to civil society the day that the consultation process was supposed to take place. So this is not really proactive and open discussion. This is, I would say it's a farce because if you really wanted input from civil society, if you really wanted cooperation, discussion, and if you really wanted to listen to each other and have a deliberation, because that is what democracy is based on deliberation, you would have created a longer process, a process that you would really listen to the opinion of civil society and, of course, leading experts. The consultation lasted short, briefly. The Institute, we tried to create a session, a consultation session with civil society in the parliament. Our request was rejected, even though we have the mechanism, we have the National Council for European Integration, which is supposed to be an open space for the government, the MPs, and the civil society to talk on EU issues. Our proposal was rejected by both the opposition and the majority. So if we are talking about real, genuine commitment to including experts in consultation processes, no. If we are talking of a process which it looks good in the eyes of international communities, we did have that kind of consultation because, of course, civil society was present in different consultations with vice prime ministers, ministers, and whatever. Now, after the French proposal was adopted in the parliament, we have the screening process and everything that is going on. Civil society, of course, must be included because that's the mechanism. We as the Institute, of course, we are included and we want to contribute to the process. In terms of the referendum, our opinion is that the opposition itself is not really confident that they want such a referendum because as we were talking about the presence of the international community, the opposition is also influenced by in the international community because it has to show its pro-European stance. And if they want to show their pro-European stance at this point, that means moving forward with this process of EU integration and hopefully changing the constitution and including Bulgarians in our constitution and moving forward in this in the second phase, in the real opening of the accession negotiations.
You mentioned hate speech, and what we actually witnessed during the last weeks, especially during this crisis in North Kosovo, is harsh rhetoric, often public insults by politicians from Kosovo and Serbia, which are not a rare phenomenon. All of this has a strong influence on public opinion and are definitely a possible generator of crisis, especially in the Western Balkans or in Kosovo and Serbia. During the last crisis in North Kosovo, even the EU, NATO reached out and appealed to stop the rhetoric, but I'm not sure that the civil society also spoke out. Do you know why the civil society didn't reach out and together or separate, maybe, Sofia?
I think that all of us, at least how I was actually following the things, I think that I don't have like a concrete explanation why we didn't react like jointly. I think that we did not maybe coordinated well, but I'm sure that each and every one of us had like different initiative and different voices covering different angles of the situation, which I find very important. All that process, and there is one very important thing. If you want the unity of civil society, then the process needs to be transparent. You need to know what are the plans. During the blockades, during the situation in North Kosovo, we were facing new information after new information each day, and that sometimes creates a problem in you shaping your answer towards the situation, and you have to be responsible because you don't want to somehow get into the game of the political leaders, because we've seen that so many times. So we're closely following the situation, and we are not and we are usually being perceived by the general public as someone who is reacting all the time. Whenever something is happening, civil society in Serbia and Kosovo, we're issuing a public statement. So I think that we are now, and I think that that is good, we are now trying to observe more and to follow actually the processes and to react timely and in the right moment, and not all the time, repeating the same thing, because that's also resonates with the public, who perceives us then as people who are constantly, raising panic about something, who is constantly like EU is concerned. But I think that sometimes we sound like that, and we are now trying to avoid it and to actually distinct like the really dangerous situation from the, let's say, I know that that sounds crazy, but from the situation that we are seeing each 2 weeks. I'm sorry, but with this hateful rhetorics and everything, if we are only focused on that, what politicians are saying and how are they addressing certain problems to the public, we would really have the need to act jointly each 2 weeks, because this is insane. And I think that this toxic political atmosphere, when it comes to Kosovo and Serbia, it's been put in place to, first of all, to somehow mask the real solutions and real deals that we are, finding out about them later, that are somehow also there to distract civil society from, let's say, very important things, because the resources of civil society are much smaller than the resources of the states. Like, we cannot compete with the state, even though I think that we've done a lots of things that were meant to be done by the states, and I'm very proud of civil society for doing so. But I think that should be that by us keep doing so, we're constantly somehow spoiling the states who are thinking like this is not our job. And actually it is, because I strongly believe that by not losing the focus from the very important things that we do, which we usually does, and we don't have like unlimited resources. We're usually limited in people, in funds, in, I don't know, many different things. So I strongly believe that we're like using each and every opportunity to react. But if we like put it like that, have we been reacting in all and every single situation? Of course not. But I don't think that that's a mistake.
Thank you. Belgzim, if you have anything to add regarding this, I mean, the situation, the last one we saw was not like the situations we had before in autumn. It was much serious. And do you think that the civil society could have published or go with an together reaction or statement?
Unë mendoj që në rasti fundit në veri Kosovës e ka dëshmuar faktikisht që këtë farë përshtatje që të shërë në një farë ose jenë përshtatje, mungesët ka dishmërisë për më përballë në një farë lloj populizmi, i cili çdo herë më shumë për dominon skenën politike.
I think that the last case that happened in North Mitrovica has just proven that there's this lack of tendency,
Tendency of populism.
lack of dealing with the tendencies of populism.
Edhe nëse shet do thotë qoftë në Serbi, qoftë në Kosovë, e kemi çdo herë më shumë një skenë politike të homogenizuar në një farë lloj kuptimi populist. Pra dhe opozitarizmi bëhet më shumë se mos ta shikojmë kush është më trafos të tjetër.
And if we see now in Kosovo and Serbia, we see that the masses in the government have been more homogenized, like in populism. You see in the opposition that they're just having also conflicts between each other in this case.
Këtë drejtim po jetë pak hapësirë për një farë lloj më real politike, të politikë më progresive, shoqërisë civile. Pak hapësirë po mbledhet për shoqërinë civile për të sikë një lloj politike më progresive, më real politike.
This kind of situation is leaving less space for the civil society to create more open politics.
Që mbetën pak zërat izoluar, edhe gazetarë, edhe organizata qeveritare që po e kanë një qasje pak më kundër leximit të pushtetit.
So the voices of NGOs and journalists are being isolated.
Shembull, është një gjë interesante nëse e marrni qasjen e qeverisë këtu në raport me verinë. Edhe qasja është shumë diçka një farë lloj ta shtri sovranitetin me ligj, ta shtri sovranitetin pak sikur me I thuhet veriu që kjo ligji, kjo kushtetuta, nuk ka asnjë lloj tendence për një farë dialogu.
For example, we see the rhetoric or the kind of relation of the government with the North currently. They're just always trying to say that we're like expanding the democracy through the laws in Kosovo when actually not insisting in some kind of internal dialogue with them.
Prandaj kjo rikthon ato që e thash në fillim, nëse shem që funksionojnë qeveritë raport me minoritetet, është pak a shumë kjo logjika e një farë lloj dhunë simbolike. Pra Beogradi që I thot minoriteteve në Serbi është I thot që kjo ligji, kjo është kushtetuta, kjo korniza ligjore dhe ja këtu të je edhe pika. Është një qasje pak legaliste, cila do vëmë nuk ka gatishmëri për të diskutuar dialog.
I'll try to get all of that. So, if we go back to what I was saying before, we also see this like approach of governments in Kosovo and also in Serbia towards the minorities. We see some kind of, let's say, symbolic violence, as you called it. For taking the example in Serbia, but also in Kosovo, where they are addressing the minorities through this, that this is the law and this is how it should be, how it should act.
Njëjtë këtë qasjen e qeverisë Kosovës raport me verinë, vend se për shembull të hapet shtrihet dora e shtetit për SPV, për çështje sociale, bëhet një program për çështje të ndëgjohen sërbët e Kosovës, SPV, të ofrohet një dorë në sociale, për çështje ekonomike, të arsimit, të ndëgjohen diçka është më shumë një farë qasje që ta shtrim në sovranitetin, është fotografia e policit, fotografia edhe kjo nuk e ndërton këtë integrimin.
It's the same case also in Kosovo, like the government of Kosovo with the Serb minorities, where it also sees like it also tends more just to stretch, like expand this democracy also to them, but not actually listen to their voices or address like social needs or create some social frameworks that actually help them in terms of economy, education.
And what do you think happened here? Since Prime Minister Kurti, one of the first promises was that he will have an internal dialogue with the local Serbs. What happened here?
Od njega predtime kryesore, domethënë edhe si parti opozitore, duke qenë parti opozitore, po edhe pasi ka në pushtet, ka qenë dialogu i mbrëmshëm. Do thotë çka ka ndodhur është që po e thon pak a shumë fundet. Para se me hap dialog të mbrëmshëm,
Why?
pushton me idenë e sepse unë mendoj që është qasja populiste. Është thjesht, më i pari është një logjikë, është një farë sovranizimit absolut të krejt, por është më shumë që kjo qasja populiste që i shërben.
This promise has also been from when self-determination movement was also in opposition, where they promised this internal dialogue with the minorities in Kosovo, and we see the complete opposite happening currently in the government, and I think this is because of some populist approach, where we see this kind of absolutist sovereignty. Sorry.
Paradoksalisht, edhe pse besoj që dashur qëllimi, kjo për mua i shërben më shumë Vučić.
And I think, in my opinion, this serves more to Vučić.
Sepse e humbë mundësinë e një farloj është vështirë me ndërtua dhe partneritet me sot Kosovës, të cilët nuk pajtohen me Vučićin për sillësh Kosovës.
Because it's difficult to create opportunities to also create some kind of a relation or agreement with the Serbian minorities in Kosovo that are against Vučić.
Këtë drejtim prandaj përmend që për mua roli i shoqërisë civile, qoftë Serbi, qoftë Kosovë, në këto skema, do të ishte faktikisht që ta shtyjë më shumë këtë hapjen e hapësirës dhe dialogut me komunitetet jo shumit.
So in my opinion, I think that the civil society, like the civil society's duty in this case should be to push towards this internal dialogue with the minorities.
Sepse kemi një situatë që ne kemi një kryeministër në Beograd, një president në Beograd, apo një kryeministër qoftë edhe në Prishtinë, që ai tregon se çka duan minoritetet.
Because we are in a situation where a president in Serbia and the prime minister in Kosovo are actually telling the minorities that what they need. So it's good to go to talk to these minorities and listen to them what they actually need.
I just need to add something which I actually forgot, which was the most important thing about the situation and reaction, let's say, from Serbia towards the latest events in north of Kosovo. In Belgrade, we had a mess. Like a complete mess. We had the government that was mixing LGBT plus rights and the respect of human rights in Serbia with the matters of Kosovo. Then we have Litijas on the street each week, each Sunday. So believe me, civil society in Serbia had a lots of things to do. The only statement that we at the end of the day, because I know that we have this dialogue in Youth Initiative, we're like, okay, what should we say in this regard? Like literally, we have this pride that like after almost 7 years of peaceful gathering and LGBT people enjoying their freedoms and human rights, the Pride Parade was banned in Serbia. Like really, it was like a really huge issue. So basically, at the end of the day, we actually issued a public statement when everything with Kosovo started, because when we saw how the dialogue is being led, that is being led behind the closed doors, that then the public was informed by each of their, let's say, leaders, what were the results, what has been agreed and everything, we actually saw that there is so much, solid, there is no space for the intervention of civil society in that situation. Like basically everything that we had to offer, we already offered at the beginning of August when the basically first incident started to happen, in June when everything started to be cooked up. But then in August, when basically Vučić turned out this situation in Serbia in a complete different direction with this Litija, where we had a huge interference of Serbian Orthodox Church in the matters of human rights, in the matters of constitution guaranteed rights, when we had the ban of Pride Parade, when we had different messages in Kosovo, and we had this huge that I mentioned in the very beginning in the parliament discussion that lasted for 2 days about the plan for Kosovo. So it was really a lot of things happening in the short period of time, which I think that was the plan. You know, because when you have so many things, that then it means that you lose the focus and that you cannot like address all things in the proper manner. So I think that this is also one part where the civil society is being, there is this new tactic in Serbia to exhaust civil society. Whenever something very important is happening, they're bombing us with news. Then you have one minister saying this, one minister saying that, president saying something completely different. National TV station and smear campaigns are being, very very actually viral in that period of time. And then literally you're constantly exploiting your own resources on different things. And then basically I think that the goal is to literally exhaust civil society, to remove the focus, to put 5 more problems in the arena, and then to exhaust civil society, and then literally so you can do whatever you want with the and by having media landscape in Serbia and media freedom on the level that we do, I think that that's then the perfect recipe for you to do whatever you want.
Ask you, to what extent do the announcement of the civil society, to what extent have they an influence on decision makers, not only, not only in North Macedonia, we can actually have them, the other panelists answer the same.
We're talking of one of our most important components of our work as civil society advocacy. In North Macedonia lately, we have had some successful cases. Civil society has been able to push for changes. Structurally, we have been able to push for changes in the law of public companies. We have been able to introduce changes in the law of domestic violence and actually push for the adoption of the Istanbul Convention. So we have been able to adopt a new anti-discrimination law, because a new law on youth. So these are just some of the cases where civil society was actually successful in advocacy, in lobbying, but also it shows a way that the government was, and also the parliament were open for discussion and open for communicating. But however, we do reach a point where our influence stops and the international community comes in. And I think here is this, what Sofia was saying, they bombard us with a lot of things that sometimes we also forget our focus. In terms of North Macedonia, that would be that we have huge issues with our education system. We have huge issues with the infrastructure. We have huge issues now with the energy crisis and with our health system. However, high politics and the dispute with Bulgaria and our EU path has become such a relevant topic that it has kind of overtaken the public discourse, that civil society has also been overtaken. And a lot of the progress that was made with introducing these kind of laws as in a way in the last year halted, because all of our focus and all of our resources have been focused on this major democracy issue. And I think this is a huge problem in terms of our works and in terms of the limit of our resources, because at some point international donors stop our work in terms of one certain topic and say, you need to focus on democratization now, this is what you are going to do. So because of our structural dependency on international funds, we cannot set a more important and relevant agenda for our citizens within our country. We have to focus on what international donors want. And right now they want us to talk about the dispute with Bulgaria. And right now we're going to talk the dispute with Bulgaria. So we are shifting our focus completely, and our advocacy is becoming irrelevant again. For example, we're trying to work on crisis management. We are trying to set up a regional crisis management network. We weren't able to do that because donor pulled out in the last minute. Of course, here we also have the war in Ukraine, which has shifted focus, and that is relevant, and it's important to mention. And of course, it should have shifted funds and attention. But we need to focus on actually working on issues that are relevant to the citizens. Because wherever you go, in Kosovo, in Serbia, wherever you go in the Balkans, we do have these interethnic issues and dispute. But if you ask the citizens at the end of the day what they want and what is relevant for them, that is the quality of life. And they want a better quality of life. And you cannot have a better quality of life if you do not deal with these everyday issues. And we need to shift focus again in talking about the everyday issues, something that we were doing in Macedonia for a while after 2016. And now we are back in the same trap talking about high politics, talking about dispute, talking about EU, and forgetting about the everyday issues.
So I'm actually done with the question I had with my honorable panelists. I would like to open the audience if you have any questions. First question.
Yeah, you can hear me, yes. Maya Halilović-Pastović from Trinity College, Dublin. I have a question for Belgzim, but others are welcome to come in on this as well. You spoke about increasing xenophobia currently, and you mentioned Orban, but probably there are other forces at play. Could you just say a little bit more about that and why now?
On a flas Franglish. Ja, precies. Unë e thashë edhe më herët që mendoj që do thot nëse shohim edhe rastin e Serbisë, edhe po edhe rastet e vendeve tjera, do thot e marrëm shembullin e fundit të paradës në Beograd, që ka qenë.
As I mentioned before, with the case of Serbia and other countries as well, if we, for example, take the case of Europride in Belgrade,
Në përgjithësi nëse e shohim, unë pak që të dashta më në lidha me zonjën nga, jo për me kundështu, po mendoj që përveç ksenofobisë, ne ende jemi në shoqëri mjaft nacionaliste.
I think that except xenophobia, we're still living in a very nationalist society.
Mendoj që nacionalizmi është jo vetëm midis nesh, po është realisht më I fuqishëm se sa që duket deklarativisht.
I think that nationalism, not only among us, is even stronger than it looks in terms of statements that officials give.
Dhe këtë drejtim, pyetja që duhet me që më duket që duhet me parashtru popujt në rajon vetës është a duan bashkëjetojnë.
The question that the people from the region should ask themselves is, do they really want to coexist with one another?
E absurdi I pyetjes është që se ki çare po bashkëjetu.
And the absurdity of that question is that there is no other way but coexistence.
Edhe në këtë drejtim mund duket që jemi më shumë në një farë faze ku ne jemi të këtillë edhe po sillemi kësaj vetëm që s'po kemi alternativë.
And it appears that we are like this and we're behaving like this because we have no alternative.
Edhe në këtë drejtim që kjo status quo realisht po e ushqen që këtë lloj xenofobie.
In this respect, this status quo is fueling this kind of xenophobia.
Rasti I Serbisë është më më flagrant.
The case of Serbia is the most flagrant one.
Sepse Serbia sot është shumë më e serbizuar se sa që ka qenë.
Because Serbia is more Serbianized than ever.
Edhe nëse shumë do thot trajektorën, trendin, çdo herë më shumë minoritetet po zhduken, po flas për minoritetet etnike në Serbi.
And if we look at the trend, the ethnic minorities in Serbia are disappearing more and more, or fading away.
Edhe në vendet rajonit nuk është më mirë, sepse edhe minoritetet në Kosovë, sado që korniza kushtetuese që paraqitej edhe punimi Ramadanit të krejt, edhe minoritetet Kosovë janë mjaft të segreguara territorialisht.
The situation is not much better in the other countries in the region. And in the case of Kosovo, as Dani mentioned, even with the constitutional framework, there doesn't seem to be any amelioration of situation.
Për me përfundu, për të me dhëmë që për mu, Krejt këto dëshmojnë që megjithatë është një farë lloj logjike dominuese, e cila edhe don një farë lloj stabiliteti, po ky stabilitet nën tokë si nën shtratë ndërton më shumë, po ndërton ksenofobi çdo ditë më shumë.
To conclude, even with the institutional framework, this kind of focus on the concept of stability is reinvigorating or reinforcing xenophobia even further.
Unë nuk I takoj njerëz se për mbyllim me kaç që mendoj që për një me Serbia sot më është Rusia e vogël. Por nuk është
Nuk I takon njerëzve, apo? Edhe një?
nuk është e pashqetësueshme që lideri më I popularizuar sot në Serbi deri në 80% është Putin.
It is troubling that the most popular leader in Serbia right now with a 80% approval is Putin.
Apo për shembull nga rajonet nga liderët në Ballkan është Orban.
Or from the leaders from the region, the most popular is Orban.
Kështu që prandaj po them që kjo çështja e ndërtimit klimës shoqërore që po ndërtohet çdo herë më shumë, edhe në raport me pakicët seksuale, pakicët etnike, po e shtyn vazhdimisht çështje për rrëshqet në kësi. Ato që do thoshte Visari me regjime pak a shumë autoritare, të cilët megjithatë po duken si modele të suksesshme. Edhe çdo herë më shumë ka një farë lloj tendence për me pa që në fund të ditës ka lije pse regjimet janë autoritare. Madje ato mund të jenë më të suksesshme.
You have to repeat this. Dush mi përsërit Belgzim edhe një herë. Apo? Ma ka dale.
I say that I think that some more the population have the sentiment that the authoritarian regime, it's not that idea. Maybe it's a good model, you know. And this is very problematic, I think, today, this, with my Franglish.
I think Vlora wants to add something, or?
Yes, I think one, because you mentioned the surveys and you mentioned what the citizen wants and everything. I think one important thing to mention here is that when you ask the citizens, what is a good leader for them? They will say accountable, transparent. They will say someone that has a firm hand, but is also committed to the people, to the citizens, is committed to the reforms, is committed to democracy. And then when you ask them who is your ideal leader, it's Erdogan, Putin, Orban, and everything. So I think they have a very mixed idea of what a good leader is and who that leader is supposed to be.
I just have to end. I will not get into these stories about the leaders. I think that this is a problem that all of us in the region have for decades and centuries. It's not like new. I would really like to say that. As for the I would once again like to emphasize the role of civil society in Serbia. For Serbia being described as an authoritarian and hybrid regime, that's also not new. Freedom House, Human Rights Watch, many like very respectable human rights organizations have been writing and analyzing the situation in Serbia, explaining it with its particularities, forms of governments and things like that. But I still wanted to say that civil societies in Serbia is one of the most vibrant civil societies in the region. I think that the situations in which how civil society in Serbia confronts government's decision, how they're ready to go on the street, how they're ready to oppose to what government is saying and actually to held account and to constantly raise the question of accountability. I think that that's still something that civil society from the region can learn from and can actually see how you should prevent some things that can occur in each and every society, because of all of our democracies are different. But I think that this fragile element is something that we all share with all this ethnocentric approach towards politics, towards voters, towards elections, towards different kind of things. I think that Bosnia is like extremely vulnerable there, but still I strongly believe that the strength of civil society in Serbia and the resistance that they are actually providing towards all these things, I think that that's something that for sure maintained at least some sort of discussion and dialogue in Serbia. It's hard. We're talking about the challenges, but usually I think that we fail to mention this thing, that actually how vibrant they are, and they're usually not afraid to be very direct and to call problems with its own name. So I know that's something that at least there is something that people in Serbia should be proud of.
Okay, I would like to maybe ask if anyone has another question, the last one, because, okay. So since there are no further questions, I would like to thank you for participating in today's panel and to invite you to join us just a second to sign the endorsement of a joint statement and the presentation of a joint statement by Agon, Jovana, and Mentor.
Thank you. And now for the final act of conflict disruption. As Sofia said, is EU concerned? Civil society is concerned, as always. So our idea has been to come up with a joint statement that we will invite those who are here to sign next over there at the door. Those who represent organizations can sign on behalf of organizations. Those who want to sign only individually, they can do that too. This will not be published today. We will also send out this statement broadly to other partner organizations in Kosovo and Serbia throughout the next couple of days. So we want to achieve sort of a more bigger crowd. Basically, it's the statement on the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue, which I will read out now. Statement by civil society representatives and activists on the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. We, the undersigned civil society organizations and activists from Kosovo and Serbia, may disagree on many issues, including the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. Our perspectives may differ on both issues of Balkan history or on what would constitute fair solutions to the region's intricate web of ethnic and political challenges and disputes. However, considering the delicate security environment in Europe and the threats that it presents to the Balkans, we strongly believe that our disagreements are far outweighed by our joint responsibility to bring to the front and center the many, even more important principles and interests that unite both of our societies. To this end, we are united by our shared understanding on the following points. One, the long-lasting dispute between Kosovo and Serbia is a serious obstacle undermining good interethnic relations, regional peace, the state of our democracies, and ultimately the path of the Western Balkans into the European Union. Point two, in light of the war in Ukraine, as well as the overall climate of geopolitical competition in Europe, peace in our part of the world cannot be taken for granted. An agreement between Kosovo and Serbia is a key precondition to building reconciliation, resilience, and peace in the Western Balkans. Point three, excessive focus is given in our societies to the risks and losses from particular political solutions, and not nearly enough to the enormous economic and social costs of the current stalemate, which are reflected, among other things, in the growing public pessimism and about the future and the worrying levels of outmigration. Point four, regional economic cooperation is instrumental to move our region towards growth and development. Governments in the Western Balkans should promote such cooperation based on the EU's four freedoms: free movement of goods, free movement of capital, freedom to establish and provide services, and free movement of persons. Point five, the current geopolitical moment is very challenging, but it also offers a unique window of opportunity for the political leaders of Kosovo and Serbia to show bold, creative, and visionary leadership, as well as for other actors in society to help and create a conducive environment for political agreements. With this shared outlook in mind, we extend this public call to the political leaders of Kosovo and Serbia to seriously commit to the negotiating process facilitated by the European Union that would lead to full normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia. We also invite them and all other actors with sway over public opinion to refrain from actions and narratives that seek to fuel divisions and undermine the negotiating process. Signatories, that's it. This will be followed by a list of signatories. We hope that those who agree with this statement can sign it over there. And we thank you for those who have been with us today, those who have been with us yesterday who are no longer here. And for some final remarks, I will hand it over to maybe Joanna and Mentor for.
Thank you, Agon. I think this joint statement is kind of a perfect way to end this two-day conference. And it has been quite a ride for all of us. As I said in the introductory speech, this was not a project-driven activity, but it really came out very organically as one of the workshops that we actually the scenario workshop. And I'm really happy it did happen. Is that the NSI and Sbunker and KCSS started something that I believe that over time is going to develop into quite a symbol of civil society cooperation, but also kind of a recognizable symbol, not only within Kosovo, but in the region when it comes to open spaces for discussions about peace and democracy. So we are really thankful for all of you for being here for these 2 days, yesterday and today. There's lunch after, just so you know. And we really, at 11:30. And we're really hopeful to see you also next year. Yes, that will be all from me. Thank you so much. Of course, yes, the most important thing. And for the staff, we need you right here after this because we want to take a photo of the family that actually is, that the teams of NSI, Sbunker and KCSS, kind of on the program level, we knew each other from before, and that's how we worked on kind of building up this story. But the rest of the people didn't really know each other until the evening before the conference. And they met and they just clicked. And especially yesterday, I really think that nobody really noticed any glitches or technical issues because they worked like clockwork. It was just amazing. Thank you so much for all of your amazing work. And now I'll turn over to Mentor.
I think that Joanna covered also for me because we were actually working as a team on this effort. So we are very happy for the results that we achieved together, but also we are happy to have all of you here. Like the conference has been with a lot of qualities, both in this side of the scene, but also in the audience. The interactions have been very fruitful, and we hope that these discussions continue even before we are having the second event next year. So I'm happy to that we joined forces to initiate this event, but also our message is that everyone should continue to work together to promote this closing this gap that exists, especially in the political level, but also in the to develop these bridges among citizens from within Kosovo society, but also between Kosovo, between our societies in the region, especially between Kosovo and Serbia, where we think that if citizens come closer to each other, then the solution is much easier. So thank you again for being part of this event. And also, we invite you to be engaged and to wait for us in next year.
Here.